Leaders from across the world pledge to accelerate work on vaccines against COVID-19 and ensure equal access globally. A number of African countries relax lockdown conditions amid warnings this could erode gains made in stopping the spread of the coronavirus. And how a South African teacher is helping vulnerable children continue learning during lockdown. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the program. I am Peninah Karibe. Rama joins me with the business highlights.
That's right, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. South Africa's land bank defaults on 2 bonds worth over $2 billion. And we'll explore why investors, both foreign and domestic, are running away from Zimbabwean equities. The details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. We begin on the latest efforts to find a lasting solution to the coronavirus pandemic. Leaders from across the world have launched what the World Health Organization calls a landmark collaboration to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. The main aim is to speed development of safe and effective drugs, tests and vaccines to prevent, diagnose and treat COVID-19, the lung disease caused by the novel coronavirus, and ensure equal access to treatments for rich and poor. French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, as well as South African President Cyril Ramaphosa participated in the video conference that also featured the UN Secretary General and the Director General of the World Health Organization. However, the United States did not participate in the conference.
Today, WHO is proud to be uniting with many partners to launch the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, or the ACT Accelerator. This is a landmark collaboration to accelerate the development, production, and equitable distribution of vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics for COVID-19. Our shared commitment is to ensure all people have access to all the tools to defeat COVID-19. The ACT Accelerator brings together the combined power of several organizations to work with speed.
On the 4th of May, we will launch a global pledging effort. On that day, we will also announce next milestones of a global campaign. This campaign is to kick off an ongoing rolling replenishment. The aim is to raise 7.5 billion euros to ramp up work on prevention, diagnostics and treatment. And this is a first step only, but more will be needed in the future. Because beating coronavirus will require sustained actions on many fronts. We need to develop a vaccine. We need to produce it and to deploy it in every single corner of the world, and make it available at affordable prices.
Human health is the quintessential global public good. And today we face a global public enemy like no other. In an interconnected world, none of us is safe until all of us are safe. COVID-19 respects no borders. COVID-19 anywhere is a threat to people everywhere.
Many of us will know that Africa is extremely vulnerable to the ravages of this virus and is in need of every possible support and assistance. As Africa, we are pleased to be part of the global effort that we are all involved in to tackle this pandemic.
Meanwhile, one of China's top doctors says a vaccine could be months away. The head of China's Center for Disease Control says vaccinations may be ready by September for emergency use.
Particular for vaccine or specific drugs, it always takes time. So you are expecting we might be able to get a vaccine, but it takes time. It all depends because the vaccine will be used for the healthy population. You want to make sure the vaccine you are developing is safe and infectious. Otherwise, can you really use a vaccine? Maybe it works. You don't want the word maybe. You want to make sure it's safe, it's infectious, and it really works for the people. In my opinion, the vaccine, of course, China, we are in the front line for the vaccine development. Maybe by September, we might have a vaccine to be used for emergency. For example, if we have some emergency outbreak again, you might be the new developed vaccine still under phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials. It can be used for some special groups, for example, healthcare workers. So it all depends. In my opinion, maybe we might get a vaccine for healthy people early next year. That all depends how we are moving forward. Of course, people learn a lot from the past, so we know some of the strategies to develop vaccine will work. At the moment in China, we already have 2 vaccine candidates. They are under clinical trials. One is 1805-based recombinant vaccine. The other one is inactivated vaccine. They are under phase 2 or phase 2 clinical trials.
Chinese health officials say all the COVID-19 patients who were in serious condition in Wuhan have recovered. The last person with severe symptoms met the criteria for recovery on Friday. The city has 47 confirmed cases as of Thursday. These include about 15 patients with mild or average symptoms and over 30 who are recovering but whose tests have yet to show negative results. Meanwhile, the seafood market in Wuhan, believed by many to be the source of the coronavirus outbreak, has reopened. Zhejiang Liu Xin visited Huanan Market to find out more about it.
Let's take a look what's happening here. These are crayfish, what I mean. They're really famous here, very delicious. But this is also first time I come and see a market, how they sell it, how they trade it. But people keep coming in, and there's a woman who's using a loudspeaker to tell people to keep distance. A little bit difficult here. This is one of the biggest neighborhood vegetable and meat market in Wuhan. Normally it's indoors, but here at the entrance here it says it's under renovation, so it's temporarily closed. So all of the sellers are selling outdoors. By the way, visiting these kind of street markets is my favorite thing to do. Crayfish again. So obviously it's difficult to keep any kind of a social distancing here, but because everybody is wearing a mask, so I guess it's okay. And actually the city is pretty safe right now. 这肉是腌过的是吗？还是？哎，腌过的3年。拿骨头，拿骨头。有活鸡吗？活鸡都是活鸡杀的。什么时候杀的？早上杀的。今天早上杀的。对。那现在还能买到活鸡吗？现在没有，这个市场里面不能卖。这个菜市场是一直都开的吗？还是最近才重开？它才开的，才开天吧。停了多长时间？停了4个月，已经买一买。Something about these markets is that it's very down to earth. People would come here in their pajamas, maybe, and they would bargain over a cent or two. So that's the kind of daily life flavor of this market.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced a phased easing of the COVID-19 lockdown. In his Thursday evening address, Ramaphosa explained the move was to spare the economy and save jobs. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The relaxation of the lockdown is an attempt to kickstart the economy. In his televised address to the nation, President Cyril Ramaphosa stated that the current lockdown has been effective in slowing down the spread of the coronavirus.
By delaying the spread of the virus, we have had time to prepare our health facilities and mobilize some of the essential medical supplies that are needed to meet the unavoidable increase in infections.
Now, government has decided to implement a risk-adjusted strategy, a strategy that will ensure that the state takes a deliberate and cautious approach to the easing of current lockdown restrictions.
While a nationwide lockdown is probably the most effective means to contain the spread of the virus, it cannot be sustained indefinitely. Our people need to eat. They need to earn a living. Companies need to be able to produce and to trade. They need to generate revenue and keep their employees in employment.
This approach, the president says, is guided by advice from scientists who have advised that an abrupt and uncontrolled lifting of restrictions could cause a massive resurgence in infections. The president unveiled new alert levels of the lockdown, which will determine which sectors of the economy would be opened in certain areas. 5 different levels will determine the severity of the lockdown from May 1, with 5 being a hard lockdown and 1 being almost completely lifted.
We've decided on this approach because there is still much that is unknown about the rate and the manner of the spread of the virus within our own population. The action we take now must therefore be measured and incremental.
Ramaphosa revealed that South Africa will move from level 5 lockdown, which is currently underway, to level 4 from 1 May. Some businesses will be allowed to resume operations under specific conditions. The return of the workforce will be no more than 1/3 per business, and a work-from-home strategy is still encouraged.
We have to balance the need to resume economic activity with the imperative to contain the virus and save lives.
Over 70,000 Defence Force personnel will be deployed to assist with various parts of the coronavirus response. The president also said borders will remain closed for international travel, excluding for the repatriation of South Africans abroad and foreign citizens. Travel will also remain prohibited to other provinces in the country, except for special circumstances like attending funerals. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The World Health Organization is warning Uganda against lifting coronavirus restrictions too quickly. It says the country risks losing the gains it has made. The WHO country representative in Uganda, Dr. Jonas Tegen, said the health system should first be fully prepared to detect, test, isolate and treat every case and every contact. He further cautioned that lockdowns should be lifted gradually and that preventive measures should be in place in schools, hospitals, communities and border points.
We should be sure that our health systems is able to detect, test, isolate, and treat every case and every contact. So this is a big work we have to do in this time to ensure that when the lockdown is lifted gradually or abruptly, that the system is ready. We have to make sure that the risk in special people and special setting like health facilities or nursing homes is the possibility of an outbreak is prevented. We have to make sure that when people go back to school or to the workplace, that the necessary measures are there for the disease not to be transmitted further.
To Zimbabwe now, where the country's homeless population has been moved into shelters. The country has also extended its coronavirus lockdown by 2 weeks to curb infections. CGTN's Peninah Karibe with the details.
Farai Shumba, Frank Mwambungo and Tatenda Bingwa live on the street, surviving by collecting empty bottles and washing cars. They were rounded up at the start of the national lockdown and brought to a shelter where they're experiencing a world of difference.
You are assured of a decent night's sleep. You are assured of a meal before you sleep. On the street, there's no guarantee of sleeping because of police patrols, and sometimes there's not enough money for food.
They joke how they wouldn't mind COVID-19 lasting till August so they can stay here during the winter.
The coronavirus has changed my life. If I look at my skin right now, it is different because I'm bathing in clean water and I am eating well.
They've all volunteered to help out in the kitchen and yearn for a fresh start.
As for me, my life is changing and I don't wish to go back in the street.
But the transition to shelters has not been easy for everyone.
We have a big challenge of drug addicts, and they are having to scale the Jurawo at Mount Abden to look for drugs, and we have engaged the Ministry of Health and another NGO which is going to deal with the problem of drug addiction.
Those who are willing at this and similar camps for women and children across the country will receive vocational skills training. This park was one of the preferred spaces for street dwellers to put up for the night. Now that they've been cleared out, authorities want to make sure they never have to resort to it for accommodation again.
We would have failed as a ministry if the majority of these people after the lockdown find themselves back to the streets.
The three I spoke to have no intention of doing so. Tatenda wants to operate earth movers. Frank is hoping to get a driver's license, and Farah is going to try his hand at farming in the village, where the air is much better anyway, he says. Farah Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The Islamic holy month of Ramadan has begun this Friday, but coronavirus restrictions around the world means that many Muslims must adapt their usual practices. CGTN's Mohammed Abu Bakr takes a look at the situation in Senegal.
Over 90% of Senegal's population is Muslim. For the members of this faith, this year's Ramadan will be like no other. The government has restricted family and religious gatherings to help stop the spread of COVID-19. But in this country, where mosques are largely seen as part of national symbols, the government's order to have them closed is one thing many locals here are learning to live with.
This year's Ramadan is really special because it's the first time we won't be able to go to the mosque for the night prayer. But we think the believers can learn from it in a different way because prayers at home are less distracting and allow the believers to concentrate better.
It's very difficult for a Muslim to get used to the idea that you're going to spend a whole day fasting during this month of Ramadan, knowing that the mosques will remain closed, maybe for a whole month. Imagine that the most important month of the year for us is celebrated in this way. It's a really difficult situation.
Despite this setback, locals have been on the forefront in supporting the government.
Since we are facing a pandemic and the whole world is affected, we have no choice but to accept it. We will each pray separately to avoid gatherings.
It is true that this year there will be no traveling nor family gatherings, but we are going to pray each one at home. The main thing being to fulfill all prayers of the day and to fast during the day.
Some religious leaders have been calling for the adjustment of the ongoing curfew. They are proposing that it runs between 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. instead of the current 8 p.m. to 6 in the morning. There are also fears that food and transport costs will rise. Mohammed Abu Bakr, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Egypt is easing its coronavirus restrictions over Ramadan. On Thursday, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli announced changes to curfew and business operating hours. Here's Adel Makhrouri with more on that.
While neighboring Muslim countries have increased their curfew hours during the holy month of Ramadan, Egypt is taking an opposite measure. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli has announced less curfew hours. He's also allowing shops and malls to operate on weekends for the first time since the partial lockdown has been imposed.
It's been 3 months since we first reported COVID-19 cases. So far, our infection rates are acceptable and within expectations. They are very reasonable compared to big countries and relative to our 100 million population. The government has emptied huge space in hospitals by moving cases of mild and no symptoms to alternative quarantine facilities. That has given it confidence to relax its preventive measures.
The government says it's alarmed by the huge influx of citizens in markets and shops due to the limited operating hours. It hopes its measures will decrease crowding. Gradual resumption of public services will resume. After the weekend, notary offices will begin operation and new vehicles registration will be open following a month of suspension.
There is agreement that the virus will last for the foreseeable future and we have to adapt to live with it. Until God wills and we have a vaccine for it, It's why we've been studying how life can resume under this pandemic. We must continue with our personal care and protective measures, though, so that we won't have to go back to taking harsher measures.
This relaxation to COVID-19 measures will last until the end of Ramadan. By then, the government will have reviewed its measures and could further ease its pandemic regulations. The government wants to avoid the threats and pain such traffic has on the public, in the streets and in markets. But there are concerns that pushing the curfew hours to begin at 9 o'clock in the evening could give enough time for many Egyptians to visit family and friends for their daily Ramadan iftar meal. And that poses risks to increased social gatherings and possible COVID-19 infections. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Time for us now to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The United Nations appeals for funds to help Uganda deal with the coronavirus pandemic. And how a South African teacher is helping vulnerable children continue learning during lockdown.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
The United Nations has launched an appeal of $316 million to help Uganda combat the effects of the COVID-19. Millions of Ugandans have been impacted by measures to curb the spread of the virus. Isabel Nakiria reports.
The funds collected will help Uganda continue with its fight against COVID-19. The World Health Organization says some of the funds will be used in testing cargo drivers crossing from neighboring countries. All recent confirmed cases in Uganda are from truck drivers from Kenya and Tanzania, according to the government.
Our option is to ensure that this risk is minimized, and that is through screening and making sure that we do testings of people coming in. And we'll be able to track them and minimize the risk of them interacting with the population.
Uganda has registered slightly over 60 cases, most of them imported. The country is on a partial lockdown and has kept its borders open to cargo movement. The stay-at-home orders have affected people's incomes, especially those that live day to day. The UN funds will assist 12.8 million Ugandans who are hardest hit. Support will go to boosting incomes of small business enterprises like market traders and improving access to health, food and nutrition.
We estimate that up to 60% of informal enterprises have stopped their operations or slowed down significantly. This is denying early daily earnings to about 5 to 6 million informal workers across the country.
The government is now distributing food to the urban poor and has asked well-wishers to come in and help. The UN says refugees will also benefit from this food.
Funding for refugee responses across the region has dwindled, as countries around the world have had to focus on their own national responses. This means that the resources available to us become meager in order to feed, clothe, shelter, and protect 1.4 million refugees and the host communities they share the resources with.
Uganda has currently shut its borders to new asylum seekers to slow the spread of COVID-19. The refugee agency says it's trying to put measures in place to prevent transmission in settlements despite challenges of congestion. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
To South Africa, where many residents are becoming increasingly desperate with no money to buy even the most basic necessities. Some religious leaders have now come to their rescue. CGTN's Angela Kopla with that story.
Religious leaders in embattled communities are coming to their rescue.
That's what we're doing here, feeding them 3 meals a day. Breakfast in the morning, 8 o'clock. We're giving them lunch in the afternoon, 12 between 1. And we're giving them supper in the evening. We're currently feeding a group of 680 people.
Churches and charities are working together to meet a very real need.
We see that there is the need to feed people. They are hungry, irrespective of if they are citizens of South Africa or foreigners. So we do not discriminate. And thank God, COVID-19 does not know who's a foreigner.
The charities that provide the food survive mostly on donations.
We use own donations, but we also got some donations from the city of Johannesburg, who contracted then Meals on Wheels, especially for the homeless people. But as I said, not everybody is homeless. They all storm from the flats, and wherever they can come, we try to feed with what we have.
People are hungry. A lot of people, especially the kids, the youths, they are hungry. I want to have a lot of less privileged people, like the widows. You see a widow that has 6 kids. She cannot feed or help herself. So that's where the church comes in.
The situation is becoming critical in the inner cities and those high-density environments with people don't have any money and also don't have any food. And it's operations like this that are providing that last line of defense. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in downtown Johannesburg, South Africa.
And with schools in South Africa still closed, students from low-income families have been struggling to access education. Many do not have the resources to pursue online classes, but one teacher has come up with a simple idea to help kids learn during the lockdown. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. Since schools closed, affluent learners switched to virtual education. But underprivileged students don't have that option. Peninah Karibe is a teacher at Summerwood Primary School in Johannesburg. Karibe was worried her students, who mainly come from Alexandra Township, wouldn't have anything to read during the lockdown. So she made a request.
It's a very, very easy, basic idea that I came up with. And all it is that people have to go into their homes where they are at the moment, and they have to look for a children's book. And then all they do is that they record themselves reading the book, or via a WhatsApp message or a video. And then all they do is that they send it to me.
With just one WhatsApp message, Pamela's Read for Hope initiative reached hundreds around the world.
My name's Matthew Scott. I live in Portsmouth, in sunny Southsea in Portsmouth, right on the south coast of England. And I heard from a friend that there were some children in South Africa in a township called Alexandra. Maybe not as privileged as a lot of us are. So I obviously asked if I could read from my first book, Cyril Squirrel and the Wonderfully Worrisome Task. And I was more than happy to do so, just to spread just a little bit of happiness, a little bit of joy.
Author Matthew Scott is only one of hundreds of people who were happy to help.
I've had the most wonderful feedback. It's part of, as Nelson Mandela said, it's the Rainbow Nation. Yet at the moment, for me, it's the Rainbow World, because everybody is putting in and just wants to help. And that is so, so important. Kindness at the moment goes a long way.
Brian Andili and his grandmother are enjoying the stories.
The video Mrs. Kenter sent to my grandchild was helping him a lot, because he was doing nothing during the COVID-19.
I like reading because reading is the best. It has good stories and it's interesting stories. That's why I like reading, and I learn more from reading.
With schools closed, millions of underprivileged children have been left stranded, but Peninah Karibe's small request that reached around the world has brought a beacon of hope to many children who now have the chance to dream of a better tomorrow. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's now catch up with the day's business news. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in business. South Africa's state-owned land bank defaults on 2 bonds worth over $2 billion. And we'll explore why investors have abandoned stocks in Zimbabwe when we come back.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in South Africa, where the state-owned bank that lends primarily to the agricultural sector has defaulted on payments on 2 bond programs worth a combined $2.6 billion. The ratings agency Fitch says that Land Bank defaulted on those 2 notes, and that in turn adds to the risks posed by the state-owned enterprises, and that had been a factor in its decision to lower South Africa's credit rating this month from from BB+. Land Bank is one of several state-owned enterprises that are facing severe financial difficulties, and they're all adding pressure on South Africa's limited tax base amidst a recession. The bank mostly funds commercial farmers. It is struggling at the moment to deal with a shortfall in liquidity. On the commodity side of things, Brent crude has risen by 11% in the last 3 days, having gone as low as $16 a barrel in trading on Wednesday. But even at their current levels, however, oil prices are still very close to record lows. Brent crude alone has fallen by over 67% so far this year. Oil stockpiles are near capacity in the United States, and that in turn has forced traders to store crude oil in large crude oil carrying ships, or VLLCs as they're known in the industry parlance. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidoo exploring how the impact of this super low oil prices will have on a net oil importer like South Africa.
OPEC countries have agreed to cut back on oil production next month. The cartel will cut close to 10 million barrels per day, and another 10 million barrels will be cut by other countries. That's about 20% of global supply, but it's only set to happen towards the end of May into June. In the meantime, there's an oversupply in the market.
We've seen before Saudi Arabia and Russia reaching an agreement that Saudi Arabia was pumping a lot of oil into the market, and there was no demand for that particular oil because lots of economies are closed because of the coronavirus breakout.
Rising stockpiles are pushing the oil price into an abyss. For net importing countries like South Africa, this is good news for consumers.
South Africans can benefit from lower petrol prices, and now as we know that transportation costs are a very important factor when it comes to consumer inflation, then it means consumer inflation won't get out of control, and when that happens, that will give the Reserve Bank more room to decrease interest rates.
The Reserve Bank has cut rates twice in the last month to help stimulate the economy. Fuel prices have also dropped, and if this oil price continues to fall, we could see more relief at the pumps, but it's little benefit to most South Africans that are stuck at home. With much of the world still in lockdown, any gains for South Africa could very quickly be offset by losses.
South Africa is primarily a commodity-producing nation, and our exports are predominantly commodities. That might mean that with not only oil going down in price, but other commodity prices because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the net impact on South Africa could well be negative of the lower oil price, along with the other commodity prices.
With some countries slowly lifting restrictions and OPEC set to cut back on oil output next month, oil prices may just start to rise again. Sumitra Naidoo, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Onto a market of a different kind now. Traders have virtually abandoned Zimbabwe's equity market as the country's lockdown adds to the strains on an economy that was already pretty badly battered by severe drought, inflation in triple digits, and a deep shortage of foreign currency. Trading volumes at the bourse have plunged by at least 55% since the government imposed strict measures to limit movement on the 30th of March. The CEO of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange said foreign participation has dwindled to just 10% of all activity compared to 2019's average of about 34%. Now, that fall-off in trading suggests that the exchange is losing its appeal as a haven for local investors who have turned to stocks in recent times as a way of protecting their savings. And we're still in Zimbabwe. The country's tobacco selling season starts next week, Wednesday. That's a week later than planned. That delay aims to give industry players time to put in place measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. SCGTN's Peninah Karibe now explains.
It's all quiet for now at the auction floors ahead of delayed deliveries that will begin on the 29th of April under strict controls.
On the floor, we allow no more than 20 farmers inside at any one given time. That is in addition to the normal members of staff of the sales floor. So everything will be done properly. As the people walk onto sales floor premises, they'll go through a footpath. They'll also go through a misting place where to sanitize their the outside body, and then there will also be facilities for hand washing, soap and water, or even alcohol-based sanitizers. And every person will have to wear a mask. In addition to that, we are in the process of arranging that every employee of sales floors, including TIMB employees, are screened for COVID-19 virus.
The new protocols extend downstream. The tobacco selling season is a bonanza for traders and vendors who normally set up hundreds of stalls outside the auction floors, hoping to turn as many sales as they can to farmers after they get paid. But this year, there'll be none of that. Only growers, licensed transporters and buyers will be allowed here. To decongest further, there are 6 centers out of Harare to buy up a crop that will be lower in volume but of a higher grade than last year's.
The quality of the crop is also very, very good. The rainy season that we had, although it was largely unfavorable for grain crops, in many ways it was very, very favorable for quality tobacco. We will certainly have over 225 million kilograms of tobacco this coming season. But we will not, obviously, achieve the figure of 259 that was achieved last year. So it will be somewhere between 220 and maybe about 240 million kilograms.
Prices should be higher too, which will be consolation for farmers having to wait a little longer than usual to cash in. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now on to the European Union. Its GDP is likely to shrink by anywhere between 5 to 10% this year, due in part to the extraordinary measures taken by governments in that bloc as they fight the COVID-19 pandemic. That is according to the EU's Industry Commissioner, Thierry Breton. Now, he adds that the estimate could fall even further if the EU had to deal with a second round of mass infections. Breton says that he's optimistic about EU leaders eventually working out the details on how to finance and execute the $1.1 trillion emergency fund that they agreed to set up on Thursday. Many shops around Germany are reopening this week as the country is starting to gradually relax restrictions. But the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, is warning the country's citizens not to be complacent. Iris Spitzer filed this report from Berlin.
Like many shops in Germany, this Berlin boutique store has had a tough few weeks.
Walk-in clients, obviously, we had 0, so all that fell away. Luckily enough, we had our online store, which was established beforehand.
But now, their doors are open again. With coronavirus infection rates falling, Germany is gradually reopening for business. But leaders are urging caution.
Wir leben nicht in der Endphase der Pandemie.
We are not living in the final phase of the pandemic, but still at the beginning. We will have to live with the virus for a long time.
Among the public, there are mixed feelings about the return to normalcy.
It's good for trade and commerce, but you shouldn't open too much. Otherwise, in 3 or 4 weeks, we might be back to where we were 4 weeks ago.
People are going to get sick. It's not okay. They shouldn't open up. They should wait 2 or 3 months until August, and then maybe. Take it slowly.
But Europe's largest economy is hoping to limit the damage. The head of Germany's Council of Economic Experts said this week he expects growth to fall by at least 5.5% this year. Health officials here believe that the virus's reproduction rate, that's the average number of people that a sick person infects, is currently below 1, largely due to public health measures. However, they've warned that if that number goes back above 1, some restrictions could be reimposed. Iris Spitzer, CGTN,
Berlin.
On to Uganda now. Millions of citizens over there are adapting, like the rest of us really around the world, to having to work remotely during this pandemic. They're using a range of platforms as diverse as Zoom to Slack and just about everything in between, more often than not for the first time. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga now explores how they're adapting not just to this new norm, but also all the challenges that come along with it.
Solomon Tumwesije presents his day's work plan. This is not his usual workplace, but at home.
The virtual office is as convenient as it gets under the circumstances that we are in now. We can still meet online, you can share. Typically you would meet your team and show them something practically on the PC.
The Uganda government is encouraging people to stay home during the lockdown. But to keep business going, Solomon and his workmates meet often on this office virtual setup. But it comes at a cost.
Data drops sometimes, the signal goes off sometimes, but we have to work with what we have. So sometimes you have to find yourself working with 2-3 different service providers to maintain a smooth run in the network.
And he's not the only one working from home. Andrew Connor is an architect.
WhatsApp is what I'm using so much because there I can send the proposal, what I call the preliminary proposal. I send it to the client, the client looks at it, and then from there he's able to tell me that, I want this to be like this, I want this to be like that.
All this comes at a time when employers are threatening to lay off workers because of the impact of COVID-19.
People can keep their jobs if only they can be able to adapt some tools. The problem that many people do have is that they resist change even when change is here to stay. So you either adapt to the technology or you die.
Solomon believes that switching to digital platforms could help many businesses keep afloat during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour. The story, incidentally, from Uganda. Authorities there are not very happy with their partners in East Africa. They're looking to control the movement of truck drivers across the border in order to stop the spread of COVID-19. How exactly will that work and what measures should you expect? We'll explore that at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead. What African writers and publishers are doing to connect with their audiences during the coronavirus pandemic.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Each year, African cities play host to a number of literary festivals. But as the coronavirus pandemic shuts international borders, writers and publishers have had to find new ways to connect with their audiences. CGTN's Lindy Mtongana tells us more.
The coronavirus pandemic has forced the global literary festival circuit to surrender to postponements and cancellations. But this hasn't stopped some passionate African bibliophiles from finding innovative ways to connect writers with their readers. The Afrolit Sans Frontières Virtual Literary Festival is the brainchild of author and publisher Zukiswa Wana. The 8-day festival brings book lovers together through live events on Facebook and Instagram.
Firstly, you don't need to think about being stuck in traffic to go to a literary festival, So all you need to have is Wi-Fi and be in your home, and then you can just open your Instagram, and then there we are, live.
Now in its second season, the Afrolit Virtual Festival will see 16 African writers from 14 countries stream content in English, French and Portuguese.
This is a way to open up the literary scene to people who may otherwise not have found it. And I think it can be very encouraging, inspiring, and I hope that even when the pandemic is over, that what we're building here now will continue.
The festival includes book readings and lively Q&A sessions, with the focus on sharing the diversity of African literature in terms of themes and language.
Usually we listen and read more in English and French, of course. Now Portuguese is not so common for you guys, but this will increase our level of communication. It's amazing. I've been talking to people from Malawi, from Rwanda, from Namibia, even Namibia. We usually don't talk to writers from Namibia. So this is a great achievement from this festival.
A lot of exciting African literature, as you know, has been coming up. There is everything under the sun. There's humor, there's crime fiction, there's science fiction. And I wanted to try and highlight this.
The coronavirus may have brought big gatherings to a standstill, but as this virtual festival shows, a pandemic highlights the importance of literature.
What is the most effective role that writers play in a global pandemic?
Well, I think the most effective role is what we've always done, is to tell stories. So I think we need to work more, because now everybody is at home and everybody is listening. Everybody wants to hold on to something or to travel somewhere where they cannot physically go. And this is our role. This has always been our role. So we're called to action even more so than before.
The Afrolit Sans Frontières Festival runs until the 27th of April. Lindim Tongana, CGTN, Nairobi.
And coming up in sports, former Cote d'Ivoire captain Didier Drogba's foundation teams up with Magic System for COVID-19 Solidarity Caravan.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Former Cote d'Ivoire captain Didier Drogba's foundation has teamed up with musical group Magic System to tour municipalities in Abidjan to distribute food and other essential products. This is to cushion the poorest families in the country from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Our reporter Mohamed Abubakar has more.
For 3 weeks now, the Caravan of Solidarity COVID-19 has distributed supplies to 12 communes in Cote d'Ivoire's capital, Abidjan. The relief package consists of rice, oil, sugar and hand sanitizers. The inhabitants of Lokrojo, a suburb of Abidjan, came to collect their donations, and for them, this caravan is a relief.
This donation came at the right time, especially this period when the populations of Cote d'Ivoire and around the world are affected by this pandemic. So this donation will allow us to cope with the difficulties associated with COVID-19.
I used to sell tomatoes at the market, but because of the pandemic, I can no longer sell. I'm at home with my 4 children. It's difficult for us to find food. And today we learned that people of goodwill came to distribute food to us. Thanks to Didier Drogba and Asalvo, we are going to have bags of rice, oil, spaghetti to feed our families in this period of crisis.
The donors used the opportunity to raise awareness of social distancing and other measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. They also launched an appeal to people of goodwill to support them in the initiative.
We have already visited 5,000 families during the first caravan and 5,000 other families during the second caravan. Thanks to our partners, we will make donations to 1,000 other families, making a total of 11,000 beneficiary families. Our goal is to encourage and welcome all people of goodwill to support us in this chain of solidarity, because this is at stake in the future of our country, Côte d'Ivoire, both socially and economically. We must fight this pandemic together to contain it as quickly as possible.
For people to take barrier measures seriously, we need to increase awareness, and that is what we're trying to do through this caravan. Indeed, it is not easy for a population where 70% live in the informal sector, but we are doing our best. We will continue to raise awareness, go door to door, until all the populations know that the coronavirus is indeed real.
Having started on Thursday, the 2nd of April, in Yopougon and Abobo, two large municipalities in Abidjan, the COVID-19 Solidarity Caravan will continue traveling through 10 cities in the coming days. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
Local sporting events have been brought to a standstill as countries continue to battle the global COVID-19 pandemic. Ardent sports fans in Tunisia say they have been inconvenienced